Not too long ago, one of my good comedian friends by the name of Landry said something on the phone that really resonated with me. And what he said was, I've gotten to those ages where
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Ty Rivera. That's right, it's Unbothered by Ty Rivera. I'm your host, Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. We're going to start this episode like we do every episode by summoning the spirit of Snoopy Bijou. For anyone that's wondering, DJ Lindy, honk, honk, honk. We have an update from him. He is doing very well in California. He's loving life. I don't see any reason to bother that. So for the people that ask me if Lindy's coming back, I don't think so. I don't know for sure, but unless I get a call that says that they want me to go get Lindy, then Lindy can just stay where he's at. He's loving life. He's got plenty to play with. And sometimes you have to admit that somebody else can give what used to be your dog a better life than you can. And for me, I am willing to accept that because I know what my life is currently like. And I know that I am working a lot, which people don't see because it just shows up either on YouTube or in on stage when it comes to the people that I'm coaching, and when it comes to me and what I'm doing here at home. I've been going to the gym a lot. I haven't been eating exactly the way that I'm supposed to, but I'm not really worried about that because my weight is staying consistent. I've been going to the gym the way that I'm supposed to, and I will get back to eating the way that I should. But sometimes I've got so much to do that me cooking just doesn't make sense because obviously if I cook, I'm going to have to clean as well. So there's that. I'm going to ask you guys to do me a huge favor, and I won't make a habit of this, but if everybody can either give prayers or send positivity out into the universe regarding my good friend Cindy. Cindy is a longtime viewer of Unbothered by Ty Rivera. Cindy's been with me in my YouTube since 2019, which 2018 actually was when Cindy jumped on board. And Cindy has been one of those, I've referenced her before, where she has consistently watched my stuff back when I was only getting 100 views. And, I talked about that before, how I'd be making content and feel like, is this even worth it? Like, nobody's watching this. And if I hit like 1,000 views, that was big. If I hit 5,000, that was huge. And, and now sometimes I find myself getting a little bit bratty when it comes to the numbers, but I I really am getting better and better about everything in my life and about the way that I handle everything in my life and not being a crybaby even to myself, because I really don't talk to a lot of people, so it's not like I'm always unloading on my friends or whatever. I don't talk to anybody. Like, my friends that I would talk to, they're busy living their own lives, and when we have a chance to talk, it's usually about good things, about positive things. I will talk to them about some of the bad things, but like I told you guys, even when it came to little Snoopy Bijou, I didn't talk to a lot of friends about that. And when I did, it was more family, and I would disperse it so that no one person was getting all of it. A lot of that I kept to myself, and a lot of that died with Bijou as, I guess, maybe not insensitive, but maybe what's the word I'm looking for here? Maybe morbid is the way that would sound, but like the further I get away from that, the more I appreciate the talks that I had with Bijou. That, like I told you guys before, were more the things that I needed to hear, but I would say them to her, and I'd be like, "You're getting stronger, puppy. Things are getting better," and and I really do cherish that now when I think about it, because sometimes I'll walk in the vacant lot behind my building, which is where I used to take her to go potty, and I'll talk to her. I will still talk to her quite a bit, you know, and that's bittersweet back there for me because it's obviously it was sad what was happening, but at the same time, I felt like I was really showing her how much I loved her at that time. And I mentioned the thing about any day can be a bad day, that my friend Landry had said that. And don't worry, I'm not going to bum you guys out, but I am going to be very real with you guys when I tell you that the reason I ask you guys to pray for Cindy is because Cindy is, and I don't think I'm saying too much here, but she's battling cancer right now. And it was something that just sprung up on her. I hadn't heard from her for a little while, but more recently she's been busy, you know, and so we haven't been chatting as much. We'll usually chat on Instagram or something like that. And I think a lot of times when people think of parasocial relationships, which are the relationships that we all have with people that are online or, you know, internet personalities that we know, I think a lot of times people think of them as like from the viewer to the creator, the person creating content. And when it comes to my situation with Cindy, that definitely was a two-way street, because Cindy, I just really appreciate the support that she's given me throughout the years, you know, because like I said, during those times when nobody was watching my stuff, Cindy would drop comments all the time, and she'd let me know that she was there and she was engaged and she was watching. And when me and Bijou were living in Las Vegas, she had my address because I sent it to her. It's not like, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea and think that Cindy was stalking me and she just got my address. But she had my address because I gave it to her at a point because she said she wanted to send some stuff. And she would send Bijou care packages. You know, that's when I was giving shout outs to Whimsy's Alligators, the never to be sponsor of Unbothered by Rivera, because, you know, I knew even then everything I was talking about was so controversial in a lot of cases. And in some ways I've calmed down, and in some ways I've just learned to say the things that I want to say and not have them get filtered out, you know, which was a learning curve, you know, and it took me a long time to really understand. And that's why sometimes if you watch my short videos, my current events videos, those will have a lot of coding in them, you know, like SW or DV or, you know, SA. I mean, like, and sometimes I'll just make up my own codes for things and tell people in the episode what I'm talking about. But I've learned that that can be an extension of my creativity. I used to see that as stifling my freedom of speech. Now I really do see it as me getting to express, like, you know, sometimes it is more utilitarian using the DV and the SA and the ones people use, but sometimes it'll just be little things that I make up that the audience tends to find fun. And I find fun too when I'm like coming up with them in my head, you know, because I sometimes will say things just out of nowhere, and then I'll be like, okay, then that's the way I'll term that, or that's the way I'll say it, so that it doesn't become a problem. And so getting back to Cindy, though, just like she became, for me, such an important part of what it is I do. And there were times more recently when she's been busy, because she was busy with other stuff. Like I said, this just popped up. She sent me a message and was like, told me that literally. She was like, yep, just out of nowhere, this happened, and now I'm having to deal with this. And so, you know, I believe that right now she's financially okay. I think it's being covered by insurance and stuff like that. I try not to pry too much because I know that people don't always want to talk about that stuff. And I have to be careful because sometimes I do have like where I assume people kind of feel the same way about me that I do about them. And sometimes with, you know, certain people, I will be very open if they have a question for me. And I need to remember that not everybody always wants to be as open with me as maybe I would be comfortable with. And so I do try to respect people's boundaries. And I don't think that a lot of people would really understand that about me, because people think of me as this thing or this person that just has no filter. I definitely do have a filter, especially when it comes to people and situations that I actually care about. I am big on respecting people's privacy. And when I was growing up, there were certain things that my parents just wouldn't talk about, because we were kids and they were the adults. And so in a lot of cases, I carry some of that with me where I'm like, okay, maybe adults don't want to talk about those kinds of things all the time. And so I really do try to mind myself when it comes to those kinds of things. But I do believe that everything's okay as far as that goes for Cindy. But I think that's one of the toughest parts about medical situations is sometimes all the money and all the insurance in the world can't fix the problem that you're going through. The best doctors in the world can't always fix the problems that you're going through. And that's just a part of being human, and that's just a part that we all have to accept. Like I mentioned my parents, and my parents are getting to those ages, and they've been at those ages for a while. And I do worry about them. My grandma, which my grandma never wanted to accept that she's older. And I love my grandma. I really do. But growing up, we didn't call her just grandma or, different Mexicans, especially, well, Mexican Americans and Mexicans have different ways that they'll refer to their grandmothers. Like, some abuela, abuelita, grandma, my little grandma, that kind of thing, or little grandma. Uh, but we were a family that used nana, that was ours, nana and tata. So if it's your grandma, that's your nana. If it's your grandpa, that's your tata. And so we're one of those families that say nana and tata. And my nana on my mom's side never wanted to accept that she was older. And she's beautiful. She was beautiful her whole life. And she stayed, because staying young looking runs in my family. Everybody stays young looking forever. And so, especially on my mom's side, like my dad's side, to give you the juxtaposition of it, my dad's side, we called my grandma on my dad's side, and we weren't disrespectful about it, but that's just the way we referred to her. But we called her Old Nana because she looked like a traditional Nana, like, the gray hair and the bun in the hair. She was Spanish, which, like, I don't really mention that a lot of times because when you're Mexican and you say that you have Spanish blood as well, a lot of times other Mexicans think that you're trying to be better than everybody else. You're trying to be white, but that is just my lineage, that is just what my bloodline is on my dad's side. My grandma, she's Spanish, very Spanish looking, she looked like an old white lady, but spoke Spanish, and nothing but Spanish. She was Mexican, because the way people end up wherever they are when they get to Mexico or however that all works out. Because I still don't know my full family history. And I don't really know how much of that is even available. Every once in a while I do jokes about it. But I'll tell you, when it comes to my dad's side, because they are Mexican, like my dad is first generation, but just barely. As in, I believe he was the first one from his family, because I've told you guys before, and I'm terrible with memory, so I never remember. But one of my parents is from a family of 11. The other is from a family of 13, as far as brothers and sisters go. So both huge families, and that's just their brothers and sisters. And so with my dad's side, I believe he was the first one to actually be born on this side, in the United States. And my dad was born in Texas. So the fact that I live in Austin, my dad reminds me every once in a while that he's a Texan, because he was born in Texas. And then when he was little, they took him to Arizona. But Texas was where he was born. And so when it comes to, my family and their history, I have an uncle that because they were traveling, I believe, from Mexico to the United States. I believe this is the way the story went. And I'm sure if my dad ends up listening to the podcast, he will correct me. Because it's not like a secret, like what the family history is. It's just there's a lot that we haven't gotten to talk about, and there was a lot that you really don't think about or you really don't care about until you start getting older. Once you start getting older, you do start to get a little more like, where do I come from, and what is my family history? But when your parents are from those big of families, a lot of times they'll only have one or two of their siblings that they actually keep in contact with. Like my dad, obviously, since he was the first one to be born on this side, it's him and his sister, which I can't remember if my tia Tomasa, is still alive or not. I know I love her, but I just haven't seen her in years. But I know she was so much fun when I was little. And her husband was an architect, and they had a nice house in Paradise Valley. Who knows where? I'll ask my dad one day. But I remember we would go to their house sometimes, and they were like the rich ones in the family. But with my dad's family, everybody's pretty good. Everybody's pretty like they're a good family. And so, but I just remember them being that family that like the nice car and the nice house and that. Or that's the way we saw them. There were people that saw us that way too, but that's the way we saw them, or I saw them growing up. But I love my tia Tommy, but she's my dad's younger sister, so she was also born here in the States. But I have an uncle that has two birthdays because I believe they were traveling from Mexico to the States when he was born. And when that kind of thing happens, obviously, especially during those days, you just have to estimate because, my dad was born in the 40s. He's 80 something. And so, his brother, who's the one I'm talking about, my Uncle Ray, my Theo Ray, he was the one that I'm talking about, and he's older than my dad. So he had to be born somewhere in the 30s. And that was the way things were back then. There's a lot of Mexicans that I meet like that have two birthdays because they just have to estimate. And so he had problems all through his life with that. I remember my dad telling me that because he's since passed away, but I remember my dad would tell me that that he would have problems because there was two birthdays listed for him. And so it was hard for them to find him with different records and stuff like that. But, my point with all that is my grandma on my mom's side, she stayed young looking for a long time. And growing up, we didn't call her just Nana, because our uncles and aunts are tios and tias, which I know there's plenty of you that know enough Latinos, but I also know that there's a fair amount of you that watch my videos that don't have a lot of exposure to Latinos or Mexican Americans, Mexicans, and so, yeah, so that's why I explain, what tios and tias are, because that's what we always called them. Like, I never called my Uncle Ray unless I was talking to one of my white friends or I was saying something at school, because I grew up in Arizona. And when I was growing up in Arizona, it was just as racist as people would imagine, I mean, like, I was around during the Mecum years, which if you don't know the history of Governor Ev Mecum, sometime look that up, and see what he was like as a governor and what his reputation was. He ended up being impeached. He was so racist, though. Like, he was legitimately one of the last in Arizona, as far as governors went, that was truly racist and said some wild stuff. And I remember even as a kid, because I was back in the 80s, I remember even as a kid, like, people on the news and news radio being like, yeah, he just said this particular thing and he just said that particular thing. And he had this famous comment where he mentioned that, some Japanese developers came out to look at property in Arizona, look at land, and they were so surprised their eyes went round and people were like, what? But that's, and so when I was growing up, if I said anything that was even kind of Spanish to my teachers in the town that I grew up in, they would act like I was from the moon. They made no effort. Like now, where people will make efforts to understand the Spanish speaking students, because I wasn't Spanish speaking, but growing up Mexican American the way that I did, there were certain words that we only ever used in Spanish, you know, like a lot of times for towel, we wouldn't call it a towel, we just call it a toalla, which is, you know, a towel in Spanish. Or like a storage room. I never knew what a storage room was until I got shamed at school one day when I was doing show and tell, and I said cuartito. And luckily, one of the other students, her name was Jennifer, ended up helping me out because the my kindergarten teacher, who was a real POS, and I really hope that she has gone to heaven or wherever she went, because I don't think she would have gone to heaven, because she was evil to me. And I'm not being dramatic about that. This teacher was so evil to me and would take every opportunity to make me feel as stupid as she could possibly make me feel. And you have to imagine being in kindergarten and having people be mean enough to you, or a person be mean enough to you, that you still remember it even to this day, because I'm long past the kindergarten years. And I still remember how mean she was to me and the way she would make me feel stupid. And there was a day where I was in show and tell, and I was telling a story. I was doing a tell instead of a show. And now I do shows and I tell a lot. But yeah, I was doing a story about a cuartito, you know, the storage room, and I was mentioning that it was in the cuartito. And I remember Mrs. Brown was her name, and she was like, cuartito? Cuartito? What does that mean? And I was trying to explain it to her, and she just still was acting like I was an alien, like truly like I was an alien. And maybe illegal alien is what she meant, but at the same time, that's what she was looking at me like I was from the moon, and I was speaking this language that she just couldn't understand and couldn't possibly understand from what I was saying either. And then I remember Jennifer like jumped into the conversation for me, also a kindergartner, but the overdeveloped kid throughout the years. Jennifer's nickname was Jugs. Oh my God. So politically incorrect, but it's true. Everybody used to call her Jugs. Even the teacher called her Jugs. Like when we got into junior high, you know, like because she just had these huge cans, you know, and she was 13 or whatever, and everybody used to call her Jugs. But yeah, good old Jugs stepped in. That was before she was Jugs. She got in trouble once too. She got told to stop getting undressed in class, and all she had done was taken off her belt. It was literally just her belt, and I don't remember what she was trying to adjust about it. I tell you, this teacher was so mean. Jennifer, though, was Latina, so of course, you know, I really do feel like Mrs. Brown was a racist woman. I think, and, you know, bless her soul, because really, even though I joke or whatever, I know a lot of these people were just raised that way, and that was common back in those days in Arizona. That's why a lot of the stuff that people say now, when they're like, this person is so racist, I'm like, yeah, on the scale of real racism to what you're talking about, it's not really that racist. Yeah, maybe not politically correct, maybe a little ignorant, but at the same time, I don't know that that's truly what I would consider racist, or would have been what I would consider racist as a kid growing up. And at that time, just accepted because it was what it was. It was the reality of the situation. And, you know, when it comes to my grandma, I will get back to that. She was always the young one, you know, like the young acting one. She would go to the Violet, which is the dance, you know, the club. And she, you know, I remember when I lived with my tia Mara at a point, there was, you know, her and my Nana, which we called Tia Nana because she never wanted to be considered old. So my mom came up with the idea. Well, actually, it was my big sister was the one who called her Tia Nana first, because if you ask my older sister, she would tell you that my mom, she would always get in trouble for not calling people Tio and Tia. She would always just call people by their names or try to call people by their names. And we were raised old school enough that you had to have respect for your uncles and your aunts, all of your family. And my sister really had a problem with that because one of my uncles, my Tio Manny, who I love, my Tio Manny, he comes out to my shows sometimes. And if you're one of my audience members that has been to a Phoenix show, there's a good chance you've either met or seen my Tio Manny. He comes to shows. He's got a lot of tattoos, more than me. He's a true old school gangbanger that has turned his life around, and I'm proud of what my Tio Manny is, and I know he's proud of what I am too. But him and my sister are actually the same age because he is my Tia Nana's youngest kid, and youngest by a lot. And so he was about the same age, or is about the same age as my oldest sister. I think they might be a year apart or something like that. They're right close in age. And so he was a bratty kid when we were little, and he would insist on making sure that my sister, like he would snitch on my sister. It's funny remembering everybody as kids when we're all adults now and being like, yeah, I remember what a pain in the ass you were or what a brat you were, because you've known each other for all these years now. But he would snitch on my sister if my sister would call him Manny instead of calling him Tio Manny. And so my sister got tired of getting in trouble, and she was young. This was before I was even old enough, or maybe I wasn't even born yet when this situation happened. But she got so confused, like kids did, or kids do. And she, like in her head, she got like, I better call everybody Tio and Tia. And so instead of just calling my Nana, she started calling her Tia Nana. And so the kids from our family, like my brothers and sisters, I have no brothers, I only have sisters, but me and my sisters all call her Tia Nana. Like that's our special thing with her. And the other people in the family know it, and nobody has any feelings about it. They have what they call her too, like some of them call her Mima because, they used to, she would be on the phone with my tias and they'd say, on the phone with Mima, which is my mom. And so they would call her Mima. And so, but we called her Tia Nana, call her Tia Nana. And so what I say all that to say that I just got a message 2 days ago that said that she was going into the hospital and that she probably wasn't going to make it because she had to have a surgery done, and just because of her age and how frail her body is, she's kept it tight and right her entire life. She really has. She's a skinny one, and that's part of the problem now in all these years, because she has some sort of blockage. And my mom was like, a blockage from what? She doesn't eat. And, because my mom is my favorite person in the world. Her and my dad, I always say that her and my dad are always, neck and neck for my favorite people in the world, because they really are my favorite people in the world. But my mom just has this way of making me laugh because she cares about things, but she doesn't care about things at the same time. And so when it came to her mom going to the hospital, because obviously that's her mom, my Tia Nana, going to the hospital and that happening, my dad was the one that texted me. And so I asked him, sent him a message back, just like asking him, kind of details, I guess you could say. And then he let me know that, my mom had gone to go see her, which my mom doesn't really leave the house for anybody. She'll go with my dad to run errands and stuff like that, but she's not out at family functions. They hadn't seen her in a long time. But, obviously something serious like that happens, and it's not really as much about her feelings for my Tia Nana because, yeah, that's her mother and everything like that. But my mom is the kind of person that finds closure within herself. Like she doesn't need to go to pay her last respects to anybody or say goodbye to anybody, which I know some of you may have feelings about that. I ask that you halt on that and not send me messages or whatever. I have learned to accept my parents as they are, the same way that they accept me as I am. So I don't get in there and tell them this is what you should be doing, and if you were a good person you would do this, because like, if we're going to play that game, I'm sure they have some things to say to me about what I could be doing differently, and what they may not like or like to hear or like to see at all times. So we have a really good way of respecting each other in my family, where it's just kind of like, you do you, I'll do me, and let's chat wherever we're at, and about things the way that we each talk about them, and let's not get in each other's way that way. So I don't tell my parents anything, and so I was surprised when my mom had chosen to go see my tia Nana, though, because that is something that is kind of out of character for her, to actually go somewhere. But she had said that since her brothers and sisters had let her know, which the only way to get to my mom is through my dad. So they hit my dad up. They told my dad what was going on. Then my dad relays the information to my mom, because my mom's like a mob boss. You will not get a hold of her. I tell people all the time, people think I'm joking. I can't get a hold of her. Like, one time somebody had threatened me with something, it was like a cancel situation online. And they said something about, getting a hold of my mother. I'm sure your mother would love to hear that you talk this way, and these are your views. And one, my mother would laugh at anything I say, especially publicly. Like, my mom is a big supporter of me, and she doesn't pay attention to a lot of what I do. And if I talk about her specifically in a negative way, and my nieces or nephews show it to her, because sometimes they're snitches like that, which I love them, but they will sometimes snitch on me, but I snitch on them too, and sometimes by accident. I have the biggest mouth by accident, and everybody knows it in my family, because I always assume that people are just talking to me. And so now we've gotten to a point in my family, it's been like this several years now, because I've been like this my whole life, where people know they have to tell. My family members know I will not snitch on you on purpose unless you're doing something really bad. And then I will snitch, I will snitch, I will snitch, and I do not care. But I will not snitch on you for little trivial things or whatever. And it does have to be something bad. So it's not like I'm a snitch just for the sake of it. And also, if I know that something could hurt somebody's feelings or could cause family drama, then I keep my mouth shut. That's one thing I'm not in my family, is I am not at all trying to be a tool of negativity within my family. That's not ever been my thing. But as far as, if people are doing things where I'm like, they're going to get in a lot of trouble if they keep doing it, I'm telling Nana, that's it. I'm telling Nana, I'm telling Nana, I'm telling Nana. And it's to the point where I joke with my niece all the time, where I'll be like, I'm telling Nana. And she'll be like, you better not, you snitch. And, of course I don't. But my point is, if my nephews and nieces snitch on me for saying this kind of thing, or talking about her, and saying something, she will either punch me in the arm if she sees me, when she sees me, and then tell me not to be talking about her, or she'll she'll tell me when she sees me or on the phone, like, hey, you better stop talking about me, you asshole. And she talks to me like that, and I think it's great. I love it. I started to mention that like last week, and then I didn't get around to it, because my mom has always talked to me like that since I was a kid. And I always knew, of course sometimes she'd be mad at me, and that's a different situation or whatever. We had whatever years we had, but everything, it all comes out in the wash, as they say, and I have no feelings about that. And people don't understand to the degree I have no negative feelings about my parents for that stuff. Do I remember certain things? Hell yeah, I remember certain things, because some of them were very formative, or during my formative years, and did shape the person I am, and shape the way I see things, and, even shape my reactions to certain things. And so there's always going to be that, but as far as me having negative feelings towards my parents, that does not exist. I really do love my parents, I'm just like, and so, like, my thing with all of that is that sometimes people will try to, like, I'll tell people what I consider a funny story about me growing up, and they'll be like, oh, well, I can't believe that your mom, and it's like, Yeah, well, believe it. That's the way my mom would talk to me, because she would use some real cussing combinations that I still love and use to this day. I personally use those combinations a lot of times now because I just think that they're so fun and I remember them from growing up. And when I was growing up, that was still during the days of spankings, and it wasn't uncommon. Like everybody on my block, everybody I knew, white kids, black kids, brown kids, everybody got spankings. And it was just a normal thing. And it was a normal thing to say, like, you would tell each other, like, I'm not going to do that because if I do it, there's a good chance I'm going to get a spanking. And be like, oh, no, you don't want to get a spanking. And I know if you're getting a spanking for that, your mom's probably going to tell my mom. And then when I get home, I'm going to get a spanking. And they would also tell you, well, wait until your dad gets home. All right, you're cute right now. You're really loving life. Wait until your dad gets home. And you knew once your dad got home, you were going to get it. And you try to be as nice as you could. You try to like finish out the day strong, but nope. If your mom had a good memory and she was still mad when, dad got home, sometimes she'd call him at work and be like, all right, well, when you get here, you're going to have to talk to your son. And so, but yeah, one time I was talking to a friend of mine who's a therapist, and we were just friends, it's not like he was ever my therapist, and I never asked him to work in that capacity for me, but we were just talking, and I was telling him some story, and he was mortified by it or whatever. It was a story from when I got a spanking, you know what I mean? But I really did feel like I deserved that spanking, and I know not everybody agrees with spankings nowadays. Sometimes, though, I do honestly feel that a good spanking when they were kids would have fixed a lot of these people that are running out here in these streets acting ridiculous. And also, the good thing about a spanking is when somebody you love actually is the first person to put their hands on you, you learn why you don't want to evoke that reaction from somebody that doesn't love you, because somebody that doesn't love you is going to give it to you on a level that the person that did love you probably wouldn't. So it's good to know what strength is before you go running out there, running your mouth, or doing things that are just outright disrespectful. And so, um, when it comes to that story, I was telling my friend about, a story where I got a spanking, and I was like, yeah, but I was being bad. And he was like, no, 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 you don't blame yourself. That's what victims do. And I was like, victim? I'm telling you a story about when I was a kid. Like, don't come over here. And I really had to put my foot down with him and just be like, don't come over here trying to make me think that I was a victim in some way and that I'm supposed to, because he was trying to tell me basically that I should be like, hold my parents accountable, like, and it wasn't even that kind of story. So for me, I was like, what are you even trying to do right now? Like, do you think I'm gonna get into it with my parents because you're telling me that I should have these feelings about something that happened odd number of years ago? Because this was even years ago that I was having this conversation with him, and I was just like, yeah, that's not what I'm doing here, and that's not what your place is in my life. And he ended up getting it together because I have always been very clear with people that I don't need you for certain things. So if you get in my way, you will quickly find your way to not being my friend. So you can either be my friend and be chill and accept what our relationship is, or you can find your way out of my life, which different people have different reactions to that, but I live a happy life because I don't let a lot of people in when it comes to that. And so with my grandma, according to my mom, which my mom usually has a pretty good sense about these things, like I said, she went to the hospital to see my tia Nana and, her brothers and sisters, what's left of them, because a lot of them have moved on as well. She told me that, my tia Nana will probably lose her within the month. It probably will be, on the sooner side because it's just gotten to that point, and she is plenty old, so It's to be expected in a certain way. And so that's why I've been thinking a lot about what Landry said as far as you get to those ages where any day can be a bad day. I mentioned my parents, and my dad, is in his 80s, and my mom has been a million years old ever since I was born. That's always been my thing with her, is she, or her thing with us. And I remember when we were kids, we'd get so frustrated with her because we'd be like, "How old are you, Mom?" And she'd be like, when it was her birthday or we thought we needed to know for whatever reason, you would be like, "How old are you, Mom?" And she'd be like, "A million." And so we'd be like, "Come on, Mom, tell us how old you are." And she'd be like, "A million." And then you'd be like, "Really, Mom?" And she'd be like, "Really, I'm a million." Something she's always said to me, something she always says to her grandkids now. My mom has been holding steady at a million years old since the day I was born, or the first memories I have of her. I don't know if she was 999,999 years old before that for a year or two, and then she moved on to a million. All I know is from all the memories I have, she's been a million, to the point where I love her, but like at this point, I don't need to know her age. I don't care. I know her and my dad are around the same age, but I like the game so much from when we were a kid that if I really scan my memory, I'm sure I could figure out her age. But there was a point, like maybe 2 years ago, where she was telling me a story about her being at the doctor's office, and the doctor told her a particular thing, and she said, "I'm a blankety blank year old woman," when she was talking to me, because with the doctor, she's cool, and like a lot of people, like a lot of older people, when the doctor says things they don't like or things they know they're not going to do or they don't care about, which nobody should ever admit that, but we all know that to a degree we're like that. Like sometimes a doctor will tell somebody, "Hey, you shouldn't eat this particular thing, or you'd live a longer life if you did this instead," and the person's just like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that, whatever, I'd rather die than eat cardboard all day," which my mom and my dad are both, in good shape. They're not like gym people, but they're in good shape, they're in good health, they like, as far as not being obese or any of that stuff. And so I remember there was a time when my mom was telling me a story, and she said she was a year old woman, and she said the actual number, and I looked at her and I was like, "No, you're not." And she was like, "I'm not." And I was like, "You're a million." And she was like, "That's right, mijo," because she points like that when she talks to me sometimes. It's ever since I was a kid she's done it. And again, that's another thing I love about her, is when she gives me and she was like, "That's right, mijo. I'm a million." And so I like her being a million. But when you're a million years old, things can happen, and I know that, she's probably not going to make it to a million and one. you know, you've been holding steady at a million this long, and I'm sure she's going through all the, but it's, so who knows how long I'll end up having her and my dad, but, I, I just am really learning to accept life as far as, the things that I need to do and the ways that I need to take care of myself and really start to think about, which doing stand-up comedy has let me be a bit of a Peter Pan for a lot of my life now, where you don't really have to grow up and you are just doing things for fun, and like a lot of that has changed. I still do things for fun and I still have a fun life, but I have to think about things on a different level now. Like, people will ask me to do things sometimes for way less money than I know that I should be getting, and for so many years I would do them, and I looked at that as paying my dues. And then there was a point where I got like, well, how much longer am I going to pay these dues? Like, how much longer am I supposed to stay in this particular state because other people think that I'm being snooty if I actually ask for what I'm worth, or if I say that I actually do care about my future and I don't want to just be running around from city to city and town to town, for peanuts. And it really is peanuts. that some people will offer me, and then they'll try to tell me the reasons that I should take the money, and it's just like, no, that's not the way this works. Like, I've been working for you for that amount of money forever, and if I ask you for more and we both know that I am worth it, then why should I not get that? And I know that some of it has to do with the fact that I only bring in so much audience right now. But there's certain times where I brought in a lot of audiences for clubs and they still want to treat me the same. And I've never had an agent. I've had different managers at different points, but my managers, that's not really their job. That's usually an agent's job, is to negotiate things for you. And I have always handled everything myself. And when you handle everything yourself, it's a lot easier for people to tell you no, especially if they can use the excuse that you're gay. And I'm not using that at all as like a crutch or trying to tell you guys this is some sort of sob story and this is what it's like. But at the same time, this is what it's like when you're gay and you perform in, rural areas, redneck clubs, that kind of thing. People will use the fact that you're a liability against you for years. And it's just like, no, I'm not a liability. I've always done well at your club. You never have problems where you need to call security. I've never been that guy that relies on security, because I truly did start in redneck clubs. Like, now I'll do a lot of redneck comedy clubs, but I really did start in redneck clubs like roadhouses, honky tonks, literal honky tonks, these venues where you don't really have club security. What you have is a door guy, a bouncer, and if that person has to get involved, somebody's head's probably going through the door. It's not going to be mine, but somebody's head is probably going to go through the door, and then they're not going to want to have you back. So I learned to police my own audience. I learned to make things fun. I learned to teach the audience to turn against them, or be as patient as I could so that the audience would turn against them when they had turned into a problem. And then when the whole room has your back, it's kind of like those people aren't as likely to try to get physical or do anything that they really shouldn't do. And so, with it being that kind of situation that I've been dealing with for my entire career now, where people, and literally people will tell me that, well, it's a little bit of a liability, the fact that you're gay. And it's like, okay, well then I just shouldn't do your club anymore. And then sometimes that people will try to give me a bad name over that, and that's where it really is unfair. And a lot of people don't understand that part of my career, because sometimes people will be like, well, you just cause problems and people don't like you and whatever else. And it's like, do you know that a fair amount of those people don't like me just because one day I finally stood up for myself and I wasn't even impolite about it? There was one person that really gave me a hard time because I had asked for more money after doing their club for 7 or 8 years. And stories like this have happened more than one, but for this one, we'll talk about just this one. I have been doing his club for the same money for like 7 years, 8 years. And so before that, he was always cool with me about who I brought for feature. So at a point, he starts putting the clamps down on me about features, which I hadn't had problems with my features not doing well at his club, and it had never been a problem or whatever. And so, but there was a point where he started giving me a hard time about my features, like rejecting them. And I grew to understand that it was because he had his people that he wanted to have open for me. So if he kept rejecting my features, the people that I would want to bring along, then he could put his people in. Also, he could pay them what he wanted to, because a lot of times he wanted to use local people and that kind of stuff. And so I just finally told him, okay, well, if that's the way it is, then I just won't be able to do your club anymore. And then he turned it into a negative thing and started treating me like I was threatening him. And I was like, I'm not threatening you. That's just the reality of the situation. Like, if it's going to be a situation where you can't give me more money, also, when I perform at your club, I have to share a hotel room with my feature if I bring my own feature, which I'm a grown man and I've been a grown man for a long time now. So I can't have my privacy when I go on the road because I bring my own feature. And I was willing to accept that for all those years. But like I said, at a point you just get like, when can I ask for more? After how many years of doing this and doing this well? Because in his room, especially, I would kill it in his room. And I really do still love his room. I don't dislike him. I really do love him. I think he helped me for some of those years. It really was, like he was saying, where he was taking a chance because he is in a particularly conservative area. But after I've proven myself to do well in his area, in his club specifically, for so many years, then I asked for, more money. Can't do no more money. Okay, then, please stop giving me a hard time about my features. Just trust my judgment. Can't do that. Okay, so there's two things you can't do. All right, so how about when I do get my feature approved by you, you got a hotel room for him separately or her separately? Because sometimes I will bring women on the road with me. Jill Chrissy, I wish she had continued to do stand-up, but I brought her with me one time. But anyway, so then he says that he can't do that. So you can't give me you can't give me my own hotel room. You can't give me more money, and you can't stop giving me a hard time about my features or let me at least have creative control over that part of my show. Even though I've proven every time that I bring good features, because I like good people to go up before me. And so none of those can be met. You can't budge on any of those three things. But I'm supposed to still want to do your club. And so I just, and I was polite about it. I just said, okay, well then, it's just not for me anymore. And, I really appreciate the years I had with you guys. And, your staff is great. Your club is great. And I did say this kind of stuff. It's all on text, And so if people don't get, they think I expose everything, but I've never shown those texts or those types of text and emails. I could do a lot of stories like this, and I could show proof of everything I'm saying. And I tried to keep it as nice as I could, and then he just kept trying to argue with me, and I was just like, there's nothing to argue about. I get it. You cannot budge on any of the stuff that you're saying. I'm not mad at you about it. I'm just not going to continue to work your club. It's not something we have to argue about. It's not something we have to fight about. If anybody should be mad, it's me. Because I'm the one that's not getting any of what I want. I'm the one that you cannot find it in yourself to at all compromise with. I'm saying if you can at least budge on one of the three, either the money, the hotel room, or not giving me a hard time, if you can at least budge on one of those three, then I can continue to work with you. At least I know that you're showing me something. But when it's no to all three, what am I supposed to do? Just tuck my tail between my legs and continue to work your club for what hasn't been enough money for me for a long time? And so stories like that end up getting around and people say that I'm difficult. And it's like, of course they're going to paint the story that they want to paint it. And in that way, I'm the perfect victim. Like they have that term, the perfect victim. And that's usually somebody that people aren't going to be sympathetic to. And I accept that that is what I am because I have such a strong personality and because I look the way that I look with the tattoos and the piercings. People can't buy me as a victim, and I don't need people to buy me as a victim. But at the same time, sometimes I do wish that people would give me the benefit of the doubt and at least put me on a level playing field with the other people, not just assume that they're right and they're telling the story the way it actually went and I'm lying, because for everything I'm known for, and anybody will tell you this, I'm not known for being a liar. I'm not known for changing stories around. And that's what does scare people and bother people about me, is that every once in a while I will get tired of people's bullshit, and that's why you will see me post things on Instagram. You think if I was trying to be sneaky, I would post stuff like that? No, because I would always know that somebody could come back and post the same kind of stuff about me. I don't worry about that because I know the kind of interactions that I've had with people. And so it's like, yeah, I will keep that to myself just because I know that if I start going that route, a lot of people are going to get very nervous, and that will actually affect when I do want to go back on the road. But also, I don't really worry about that too much because I know that I just have to do my own thing. And I'm not getting any younger. And I know that I'm getting better at stand up. Believe it or not, I know that I'm still, because stand up, I've always said, there was a point where this woman, one day I'll tell the full story about this woman, only because she's evil and she deserves it. But, she kept insisting that I was trying to call her old. When I wasn't calling her old, I was calling her irrelevant. Now, both were true, but I don't care about the old part, because when it comes to stand-up comedy, whether you're male or female, yeah, if you're trying to be an actress, that kind of thing, you will age out of that unless you're going to be like a grandma type. And I'm not being silly. I have a friend that's very beautiful. I've known her since she was in her 20s. And not too long ago, I was talking to her. She still looks like she's in her 20s, but she's actually close to 40 now, if not 40. And so I was talking to her, and we were having a very real conversation. She's very beautiful, very undeniably beautiful, always has been. So we were talking, and she was like, she's an actress, comedian, actress. And she was talking to me, and she was saying that, auditions have slowed down because now she would be in the age range, because she still looks young, like I said. But she would be in the age range of a young mom, or possibly like teacher, that kind of thing. And so I was like, and she has acted in a fair amount of stuff. She's a good actress, and I told her, well, you still look like you're in your 20s. And she was like, you're right. I do still look like I'm in my 20s. Until they do a casting call and I'm in a room full of 20-year-olds. And then she's like, then I don't look like I'm in my 20s. And so the reality of it is, that's what it is. And so if you're being an actress, but when it comes to comedy, you only get better at stand-up because you only get more life experience. If you're good at it, you only get funnier. Obviously at some point, if you get Alzheimer's, that kind of thing, or if you have Alzheimer's, however you would term that, dementia of any kind, then obviously that's going to affect it or whatever. But as long as your mind stays sharp, it doesn't matter if you get old or if you're older. And so I was telling this person, I was like, yeah, I'm not saying you're old, but she just kept saying it over and over. And then she made a whole thing of it and told people that I had been saying that she was old. And I was like, that wasn't even our conversation, which that I still have screenshots of too. But she is related in a way to somebody that's very powerful in the industry. She went and told them. I'm sure they didn't ask for any kind of receipts. I'm sure that they didn't see what the actual conversation was, because if they saw the actual conversation, they would see that I did not say she was old. Our conversation was about the fact that she was irrelevant. And the only reason I had even called her irrelevant was because she was trying to give a younger comedian, a younger female comedian, some really bad advice as far as trying to go the true feminist route, because that was something that people were actually considering back in, I think this was 2016, 2015, somewhere around there. Somewhere between 2015 and 2018 was when it was. And like that was a big thing, was going the SJW route or going the feminist route for female comedians. Even men were like, I'm a feminist, and which but like that. And so I was telling that person, and originally I wasn't even directing anything at that person. It was on a public thread. It was on their Facebook, and they were saying something about the feminist route. And then there were a bunch of women on there, not a bunch, but a few women on there giving the bad advice, like, you should definitely go the feminist route and make sure these men know, that kind of thing. And I, of course, having my attitude and being this, I'll admit, I was, just being a piece of shit, but it was funny. And I said, just keep being funny and don't actually commit to any real movement. Just continue to be a funny comedian, or else you'll end up being home all the time like the rest of these bitches on this thread. But there were other bitches on that thread, but she was the only one that took it personally. And then she decided that she was gonna, give me some credits that she had, which were irrelevant credits. And I was like, those don't matter. Those are not actual things. Do not pretend Like I'm actually supposed to pretend that that is a real thing. And you actually got that award. Nobody cares about those awards. Nobody cares about awards, period, in comedy. It's what you do now. And I have performed with you enough to know that you eat shit. You do not do well at stand-up, which is what I do, is stand-up, and the only place I've ever seen you. So save it for whoever. But she just kept with the, like, oh, well, you think because of my age? And I was like, I never mentioned your age. You're the one bringing up your age. I don't care about your age. And so it was like that kind of situation. And it wasn't even until she pressed that for a while that I even called her irrelevant or actually used the term irrelevant. Up until that point, I had just been telling her that the things that she was mentioning were not relevant to the conversation. Those awards, those, accolades that you actually consider to be like, some sort of proof that you're good at this are not that. The proof that you're good at stand-up is doing stand-up. It's how you do on stage. So as much as anybody will try to tell you, like I could tell you, I've been on Comedy Central twice, I've toured to no. The only thing that matters is how I do on stage. And you notice a lot of people talk shit about me at different points, but nobody that's actually good at stand-up or knows stand-up ever says that I'm not good at stand-up. Why do you think that would be? Why do you think it would be that when people are mad at me, what they bring up is my personality or the fact that I don't always get along with people? Why do you think that's what people bring up instead of saying I'm not funny? Because really, any conversation, if it were true, could just end with somebody saying, yeah, you're not good at stand-up. But you notice nobody says that, even though I'll say horrendous things about people's stand-up because it's all true and they know it. That's why they don't come back and say it back to me. Instead, they'll be like, well, you have problems getting along with people. Yeah, so what? So what if I do? I'm clearly arguing with you, ain't I? Anyway, stay unbothered.